Act 2. The God-Pleasing Crown Prince. Chapter 25. Upon the grand avenue of divine might, a fleeting glimpse of beauty. The sword was thrust, penetrating the heart of the demon, and left its dead on the ground. By heaven's blessings, malevolence is slain and evil is subdued. On either side of the grand avenue of divine might, cheers erupted like an ocean current, coming in wave after wave, each one cresting higher than the last. In the courtyard that stretched before the scarlet-red gates of the palace, two cultivators, who played the roles of god and demon, bowed to the surrounding crowds and stepped down, standing off to the side. The martial match that opened the show heightened the excitement in the city. Not only were the streets packed elbow to elbow, even the rooftops were full of brave climbers, clapping, hollering, flailing. The crowds went wild. A celebration of this magnitude was truly brimming and bustling with energy. In the history of the kingdom of Shinla, if any festival of Shengyon was to be described thus, it had to be the one happening today. Upon the towering platform, row after row of finely dressed royals and nobles overlooked the crowd, all wearing courteous smiles on their faces. Within the palace, a line of hundreds waited silently. When the bell chimed, the state preceptor stroked his non-existent beard and began to call roll. Path-opening warriors, present. Jade maidens, present. Musicians, present. Cavalry, present. Demon, present. The God-pleasing martial warrior. No one answered. The state preceptor frowned as he noticed the complication and turned his head. The God-pleasing martial warrior. Where is the crown prince? Still, no one responded. The one who had answered to demon paused before he removed the monstrous mask, revealing a delicate, fair face. This youth appeared to be about 16 or 17. His skin and lips were both light in color, fresh and neat, and he bore a pair of bright, shimmering eyes, as black as obsidian. His hair was soft and silky, and a few loose strands lightly littered his forehead and cheeks. He looked quiet and obedient, in contrast to the monstrous demon mask in his hand. He replied quietly, "His Highness the Crown Prince has left." The state preceptor almost fainted, but for the sake of this grand occasion he couldn't faint, so he held on and instead yelled with an angry expression, "What? He left? When did His Highness leave? The ceremonial parade is about to leave the palace gates." When the grand stage is revealed, and there's only a demon but no god, my old bones won't be able to swim out of all the spit that'll come flying at me. Muqing, why didn't you stop him? Muqing hung his head. When His Highness left, he told me to pass on the message not to worry, and that everything can proceed as planned. He will return promptly. The state preceptor was in hysterics from anxiety. How can I not worry? What do you mean, promptly? When is promptly? What if he doesn't make it? Outside the palace gates, the citizens who had been waiting since early morning were losing patience, and were noisily demanding for the event to start. A cultivator came rushing forward. "My lord state preceptor, the queen sent a messenger inquiring why the parade hasn't started. The fortuitous hour is fast approaching. If we don't leave now, we'll miss it." At those words, the state preceptor desperately prayed that a rebel army would suddenly invade and disrupt the Shengyon parade completely. Why did this headache have to happen right at the most crucial moment? If the troublemaker were anyone else, he would have flown into a rage already. No one would consider it a strange urge if he brandished a sword with intent to kill. But this troublemaker just happened to be his very, very favorite, most precious disciple, and the very, very distinguished, most precious son of another. He couldn't beat him, he couldn't yell at him, and he most definitely couldn't kill him. Rather than kill him, he'd more likely kill himself. Just then, someone ran across the palace's black path and rushed inside, shouting, "Lord State Preceptor, why hasn't the parade started? The hour is about to pass. Everyone outside is on edge." The one who'd arrived was also a young man of 16 or 17. His build was upright and tall, his skin the color of wheat, and on his back he carried a long black bow with a snow-white quiver. His lips were pressed tight, his brow was knit. Even at such a young age, his eyes were determined. The moment the state preceptor saw him, he grabbed him. "Fengshen, where's that highness of yours?" Fengshen was taken aback, but understanding instantly dawned, and anger filled his eyes as he turned to gaze at Muqing. As for mooching, he had already put his demon mask back on without a word, his expression now unseen. Feng Xin said gravely, "There's no time to explain. Please start the parade immediately. His Highness the Crown Prince will not disappoint you, sir." There was no other way. Bringing out a grand stage without the god-pleasing martial warrior was death. Delaying the procession and missing the fortuitous hour was also death. Despairingly, the state preceptor waved his hand. "Start the music! Depart!" Upon receiving the command, the flutes and strings started to play, and hundreds of royal warriors at the front of the procession roared in chorus to begin their march and lead the massive, impressive parade. They had departed. The warriors at the front symbolized the thorny paths of the mortal world. Immediately following were the virgin girls meticulously selected from thousands of applicants, demure and beautiful. With baskets in their hands, they scattered flowers in the air like the celestial maidens they played, paving the path with blossoms and filling it with fragrance to signify enduring and unsullied virtue. The musicians rode in carriages of gold. The moment the procession left the palace gates, the crowds were amazed and astonished, fighting to catch the flowers. However, no matter how magnificent, how extravagant, how grand, this was only the warm-up act. The grand float, a glorious stage, was about to emerge. 16 white stallions adorned with gold pulled the grand stage from behind the palace gates, slowly bringing it before the eyes of millions. On the stage was a black-clad demon with a monstrous mask on his face and a 9-foot-long saber in his hand. Gravely, he shifted to a fighting stance. The state preceptor was tense like a taut string, hoping for a miracle. Yet, no miracles occurred. The crowd broke into chatter. Above, on the high platform, the royals and nobles frowned, exchanging wondering looks with each other. What's going on? Why is the god-pleasing martial warrior not on stage? Has His Highness the Crown Prince not arrived yet? Where's Langiga? At the center of the tall platform sat a dignified, handsome man and a fair-skinned, amiable, gracious noblewoman. They were the king and queen of the kingdom of Shunla. Not seeing the one who should be there, the queen gave the king a worried look. The king took hold of her hand and used his gaze to comfort, telling her not to worry and to watch and see what would happen. The crowds below, however, had no one to comfort them, and their cries grew louder, so much so that the noise could almost raise the rooftops. The state preceptor could only blame himself for not having the courage to kill himself right then and there. Yet, on stage, Muqing was quite calm. Even without his opponent, he remained meticulous, taking care of his own stage directions. Clang! He hurled his heavy saber down into the stage, standing it upright before him, performing an act of chilling slaughter. The black-clad youth impressively ended the opening act as the demon. By face and by form, Muqing was a delicate and elegant like a gentle scholar, and yet he still swung an impossibly heavy 3-meter saber as if it were feather-light in his hands, as if it were weightless. Another group of cultivators playing the roles of demon vanquishers leapt onto the stage one by one, and one by one they were instantly defeated and chased off the stage. That saber danced skillfully and made the performance quite exciting to watch, so some in the crowd cheered for him. Except the people didn't come to watch a demon causing havoc. So, after the act, there were more complaints. Where's the god-pleasing martial warrior? Where's His Highness the Crown Prince? We want to see His Highness playing the Heavenly Emperor. Defeat the evil. Upon the towering platform, a furious voice shouted, "Where's my cousin? What the hell? Who wants to watch this crap? Where the fuck is my cousin the Crown Prince?" No need to confirm who that was. Obviously, that loud voice belonged to none other than Prince Xiaojing, Qirong. Sure enough, many looked up and saw a young man, finely dressed in light turquoise brocade and a necklace, rushed to the edge of that platform, and his fists shaking angrily. This youth was no older than 15 or 16, his face fair and his brows black, rather attractive, but his face was twisted murderously, as if he were going to jump off the tower at any moment to beat someone. However, the tower was too tall. If he jumped, he'd break his legs, if not die. So instead, he grabbed a white jade teapot and hurled it down. That hurled teapot flew quickly right at the back of the demon's head, looking like it might knock him out on the spot and spill his blood. Unexpectedly, however, the demon shifted his stance, slanted his saber flat, and caught the teapot on the tip of the blade. The tottering teapot came to a stop, prompting another wave of cheers. Muching then flicked the long saber, and the teapot was hurled into the air and to be caught by someone below. He continued to play the role of the demon languidly, swinging the long saber, slaughtering humans. Qirong was outraged and was about to throw something else, but the queen had ordered someone to pull him away, so he was reluctantly dragged off. Yet the faces of the nobles were looking more and more grim, and some were growing restless. That the god-pleasing martial warrior would disappear right before the heavenly procession of the Shengyong festival was no laughing matter. But just then, a roaring cheer like a storm exploded from amongst the people, louder than the cheers from before. A snow-white silhouette had descended from the sky and landed right before the black-clad demon. Upon his landing, his heavy white robes fluttered and covered the grand stage in the shape of a giant flower, and a golden mask hid his face. He held a sword in one hand, and the other gently flicked that foreboding blade, the resounding ringing pleasing to the ear. This gesture was serene and confident, as if the demon meant nothing to him. The demon slowly raised his long saber and pointed it to him, and the white-clad martial warrior unhurriedly rose to his feet. I have an image. Qirong's eyes were shining bright, his face red. He jumped up and down, shouting, "Cousin Crown Prince! Cousin Crown Prince has come!" Above and below, all were agape. This entrance was like the descent of a real heavenly being, exceedingly audacious. The city wall's tower was at least 30 meters tall, and the eminent crown prince, whose person was worth 1,000 gold, had still leapt down from it. In that moment, thousands had thought a god had truly descended. When they recovered from their shock, fervor filled their veins. The crowd was hysterical, applauding with wild intensity. Qirong, too, was shouting, leading the crowd in wild applause, yelling until his voice was hoarse, clapping until both his hands were red. The king and queen shared a look, smiling, and applauded, too. The rest of the nobles eased their furrowed brows and sighed a breath of relief before joining in the cheer. On either side of the grand avenue of divine might, the crowds went wild like crashing waves, hundreds and thousands of men so excited they pushed against the royal guards, wanting to approach closer to holler. Upon the grand stage, two figures, one black, one white, faced each other, each with their own weapon in hand. God and demon would finally face off. Seeing that everything had worked out, the state preceptor finally relaxed his shoulders and mounted the towering platform. After nodding to his fellows in greeting, he found a seat for himself and sat down. The king chuckled. "State preceptor, how did you come up with such an exhilarating entrance? How splendid." The state preceptor wiped sweat from his face and smiled. "Splendid indeed. But unfortunately, this lowly subject didn't come up with it. I'm afraid it's His Highness the Crown Prince's own idea." The queen patted her heart. That mischievous child! To jump from such a height without a word of warning, I almost stood up in fright. The state preceptor couldn't help but lace his words with pride. My lady queen can be at ease. The martial might of His Highness the Crown Prince is extraordinary. Dozens of meters is nothing to him. Even with towers that are many times higher, he can easily mount and easily jump off with his eyes closed. The queen appeared pleased and said gently, "Thanks to the teachings of the state preceptor." The state preceptor laughed. It's nothing. His Highness the Crown Prince, darling of the heavens, is divinely gifted, marvelously talented, and graciously brilliant. It is the fortune accumulated from 3 lifetimes that gave this lowly subject the chance to become his teacher. I have a feeling that with His Highness the Crown Prince's presence, today will go down in history as the most impressive of the god-pleasing ceremonies martial matches. His words of praise were exceedingly smooth, alluring to the heavens. The king smiled and turned back to watch the performance. I hope that's the case. In the heavenly procession of the Shengyong festival, the god-pleasing martial warrior and the demon were the 2 most important roles. Both must be played by young men exceptionally skilled in martial arts. The god-pleasing martial warrior especially. The presentation and make of his costume were strict, transcendently magnificent, and after dressing, the weight of everything worn came to 25 or 30 kilos. The martial warrior must, under this heavy burden, before the eyes of millions, march around the capital a number of times and perform in the martial match for at least 4 hours. There must also be no mishaps throughout, and so the performer must be extraordinarily skilled. Fortunately, both of these young men were outstanding. It was a fierce match. The saber parried the sword. The combat was a thrilling sight to behold. The moves were also calculated to the minutest detail, obviously having been practiced and rehearsed many times. "Who's the one playing the demon and sparring with the crown prince?" the king asked. The state preceptor cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, he's a young trainee from the Royal Holy Temple. His name is Mooching." The queen said sweetly, "I see that child is also rather skilled in fighting, just a bit weaker than my son. Maybe about the same level as Fengshen?" The state preceptor didn't appear to agree with her sentiment. Qi-Rong had been lying on the queen's lap eating grapes, and he spat out the skins in a rush. No way, no way! Not just a bit weaker. He's far weaker. Not just anyone can compare to cousin Crown Prince. Hearing this, the queen patted his head, smiling, and the rest of the nobles all laughed, their bodies swaying back and forth in mirth. They teased, "Wrong heir certainly clings to his cousin. If a day passes when he doesn't praise him, he's miserable." Down below, in the sea of people, the cheers and hollers were shooting through the heavens. "Fight! Fight! Kill him! Slay the demon!" The roars of excitement were growing stronger. Qi-Rong was also adding to the noise, circling both his hands around his mouth like a trumpet, shouting and laughing. "Cousin Crown Prince, go! You can easily knock him down with one hand. Show him how it's done!" Suddenly, the demon on the stage slashed forward. The martial warrior repelled the attack with his sword, but made a noise of curiosity. During the heavenly parade, the martial match was a performance for pleasing the gods, and at most one should use just a seventh of their power, pulling their swords at contact. However, with that strike he received just now, the sword in his hand had almost flown from his grip. Obviously his opponent had used all of his might in that blow. Shi Lian raised his head slightly and called out, "Mooching?" The young man playing the demon didn't say a word, just slashed at him again. Shi Lian had no time to think as he received one attack after the other, their weapons clanging. This is more exciting than fake sparring, Shi Lian thought, and his spirit heightened, immersing himself more into the fight. Thus, under the clashing roar of cheers, the weapons clashed and sparks flew. The more invigorating the fight was on stage, the louder the cheers below. Suddenly, there was a deafening clang. White light flashed, and the crowd gaped, their breaths hitched. That 3-meter saber was flicked out of the demon's hand by the long, slender sword of the god-pleasing martial warrior and was nailed directly into a stone pillar of the towering platform. A few bystanders tried to pull it out, but even when they pulled with all their might, the long saber didn't move an inch. They were greatly astonished.